You don't need a title to lead. Just ask Brad Englert. After decades in the trenches, leading massive tech transformations at Accenture and UT Austin, Brad's new mission is teaching you how to lead without power plays. His secret? Spheres of influence. And today, he's going to share the blueprint with us. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for inviting me.
Appreciate you being here. So, you've worked with Fortune 500 companies, major universities. What's a common leadership challenge that you see across both?
I think a lot of organizations, and this is a dirty little secret, don't have a strategy. And I find that when I got to the university, they had asked me to help them with their first IT strategy. And it really helped guide the organization for the 8 years I was there. I would say make sure you have a strategy. If not, get some help to make one. Customers, probably once a month, depending on how closely I'm working with them.
So, could you maybe share a moment in your career where you had to lead without formal authority and how you handled it?
I was at the a university, Research One University, and the leader of the transformation project had never done it before. And I talked to their executive leadership and I said, in fairness, you asked this person to do something they've never done before. And it was basically an ERP implementation. I said, I've implemented 15 payroll systems. I know how to do this stuff. So they actually put me in a client role. So I was the client lead of the transformation project. And the person that they asked to lead actually worked with me on the team and we're successful together. But sometimes you need to assert yourself, especially when executive leaders aren't behaving correctly.
And leading without authority is hard. I worked in a company where there were 8 directors and everybody had their own little area of influence. And
Mhm.
as the tech director, a lot of times things I was asked to do brought in 3 or 4 of those leaders, but yet I had no authority to tell them what to do, when to do it,
That's
how to
right.
do it. And so you have to figure out how to get around all that. So that's always a fun challenge. So
Those are your peers and influencers. It is hard to do that. But one thing I tried to do when I got to the university is I was strategic and with intent met with my peers across the university because take, for example, the VP for public safety. It wasn't a question of if there would be an incident, but when there would be an incident and how do our teams work together when there's an incident. And we had a bomb scare, we had a shooting, we had a murder, we had 100,000 people in the stadium every other Saturday in the fall. Both our teams worked very well together to make sure people were safe. If I didn't get out and meet with him and understand what his goals were, and I wanted him to know I supported him,
yeah. So what inspired you to write Spheres of Influence after a 40-year tech career?
I had a lot of stories and I shared those with my staff over the years. And they actually, some of the stories are funny. They call them Bradisms. And when I retired from the university, I thought, I'm still mentoring 2 or 3 people, but that doesn't scale. And I'd like to help a lot more people, especially early in their career. So that's where I got the idea of a book. And I met with my publisher, and the editor was really good. She said, just inventory all your stories. We'll get onto a whiteboard and we'll find a structure. And sure enough, I had boss stories, had direct report stories, customers, peers and influencers, and they just fell into these buckets. And the other thing she says, you're not writing one page till you have the full outline. That spoke to me. You don't build a house without a blueprint. You don't write a program without a design. It was really nice to have that full outline. And then it was just fun to recount the stories. I did change the names to protect the guilty and innocent party, and no companies have been named.
It's interesting. That's good advice that she gave you because I actually had worked with a coach about a year ago on just content. And one of the pieces of advice that he gave me was tell stories in your content. And I said, that would take me a long time to think of some of these stories. And he said, when you have spare time, think of your past stories and put them into a document somewhere. And then
Mhm.
as you experience things, like if a client says something and just makes you laugh or it causes some issue that you can solve, put it in there, start keeping
Mhm.
track of it. You're going to have many more stories that you can tell as long as you
Right.
get to the point of removing the ones you already used. And it's great. And sometimes just having that database, I'll think to myself when I'm writing something, and didn't this happen to me once before? And then you'll search through it and you find it.
Sure.
Yeah.
The other hope I had was I wrote a blog once a week for 8 years at the university. Now, why did I do that? One, I wanted to communicate to my staff, 330 people in central IT. I wanted to apologize when we screwed up. And it was a two-way vehicle. So I had one of my staff said, "Hey, it was nice that you mentioned the career awards, but it takes 6 months to get their pin." And so I didn't know that. We're a huge bureaucracy. We'll fix that. But just having that dialogue was really, really helpful. And so I had a lot of that content to pull from.
That's the kind of a database of commentary or stories or even just quotes is huge. Years ago, we started probably 10 years ago now, we started a podcast network and we started archiving, taking snippets of content and creating smaller pieces to reshare. And I had the idea back then to have a database about it. And I was very strict about, you got to get the stuff into the database. And to this day, we use that database to find
Mm,
old things that were said and put them out again, or maybe we're doing a
sure.
podcast episode about something that we've done before and we want to
Mhm.
talk about something we said in there. It's just so much easier to find things. So what's the first step that someone could take though, if they want to grow their influence, but they don't have a big title?
You need to be strategic and you need to be intentional. So you don't have to have authentic business relationships with everybody. Your boss is obvious. Your direct reports is self-evident. All your staff takes more work, different communication channels and techniques. But when you identify your best customers, not all your customers, your best customers, and your most strategic vendor partners, then before you meet with them, you you have an agenda. What are the things you want to share? And then you send it to them beforehand. What do they want to ask you? And that becomes just a regular cadence every month. Once I'm talking with them, I ask, there are three principles that apply to all business relationships. One is understand their goals and aspirations, whether it be your boss, your direct reports, or your customer. What are they trying to achieve? Second, set and manage expectations. I was really bad at that early in my career. I got a lot better later in my career. And I had worked with them on a statewide network design a few years earlier, successful design. And I said, "Give me some advice." He goes, "Get out of the office and tell people you give a damn." And that was the best advice because I didn't hide in the ivory tower. I didn't make people come to me and supplicate. I would go out and meet them in their offices, whether it's my direct reports or the peers. I was able to cross campus, bump into customers, just get the energy of the campus. And my direct reports saw me coming to their team leader every week, just like clockwork, and showing the flag and understanding what do their team leads, what are they trying to achieve, and how can I help them get there?
Could you give us a breakdown of how your spheres of influence model actually works in real situations?
It's let's take one of the principles, set and manage expectations. So I had a boss who was this type A personality boss. Everything was urgent. And I was trying to leave one day to have dinner with my wife, and I get this call, 5 o'clock. It's the boss. "I need a white paper, white paper." And I literally said, "Whoa." I didn't say no because that set her off. I said, "Whoa, when do you need this white paper?" "Oh, let me check my calendar." "Oh, in 2 weeks. I meet with the client in 2 weeks." "Okay. How many pages do you want this white paper to be?" "Oh, 3 pages." I was thinking 10. "Do you have an example of white paper that I could use?" "Yeah, yeah, ask David. I did one in XYZ Corp 10 years ago." Guess what? I went home and had dinner with my wife. Now, before I learned to say whoa, I would have called my wife and canceled dinner. I would have stayed up all night doing research and the next day delivered a 10-page paper and get yelled at. So just saying whoa gives some mental time and energy to really understand what's being asked.
You know, that totally makes sense. I mean, I actually I learned that over the course of my career as well, that like you have to let work stay at work.
Mm,
And I always tell my clients, there's a reason you have a staff and that they each have defined roles.
yeah.
And there's somebody who's looked at as like the number two in command when you're not there.
Mhm.
It's so that you don't have to be there all the time.
That's right.
That's the reason. And so kudos to you for going home, having dinner with your wife and not canceling. Because like you said, it would have ended badly on all sides. Personally, you would have been upset that he didn't come home for dinner.
I
And
would
then
have been frustrated.
you'd have been frustrated. And then professionally, the boss would have been frustrated that she got this 10-page document that she wasn't looking for.
So one time I had a customer who wanted me to lead their transformation project. It was in October and a big research one university in the Midwest. And I was having lunch with the CFO and the provost, and I said, I know we can be successful. I'm excited about coming to help you. However, in June, I have a long planned vacation to Australia. We have the plane tickets. It's 3 weeks in June. I really need to do that. And they said, of course, yeah, no problem. So we get to May and we're meeting with the president for a monthly meeting. Mr. President, want to remind you, as I did the last 3 months, that next month I'll be out on vacation. And his hands start shaking. And it's like I'm doing this slow-mo canceling my vacation. Whoa. And the CFO says, and the provost said, hold on, Brad, stop. Mr. President, when Brad joined us in October, he told us about import this vacation is important for his family and him, and we should uphold our commitment. So I went. Diane was in charge. She did a great job. I didn't check email, didn't check voicemail. Fast forward 10 years. I'm I'm back in that Midwestern city having lunch with the CFO and his spouse and my wife. And we talked about that situation. He goes, Brad, when you were gone, we were scared to death. But the fact that they upheld their commitment because I set and managed the expectations, that was really special.
So where do technical leaders often struggle the most when they want to become influential?
I think getting out there, not hiding behind your screen. And you can do this virtually. I had a team at Accenture for a couple of years that they were all over North America. So we didn't have an office anywhere. We all worked out of home and then we would meet at project sites, whether it's Whirlpool in Benny Harbor or Bell South in Atlanta. And that, but every week, like clockwork, the leaders would get on the phone and we talk about projects that are coming up, staffing, who can stretch roles, who can stretch roles. And then twice a year, we get together in person so we actually could see each other, the whole team. And then I would visit each project site and I'd go meet with the customer. I'd go meet with all my staff, all levels, and take them to dinner. And we called it our Winnebago trips. So I would get in the Winnebago and go visit projects all over the country. And when we did the 360 feedback, everyone loved the Winnebago trips.
Yeah, no, that's actually great advice though. So what's something your 25-year-old self would never believe about how influence really works?
Well, I was lucky because when I joined the firm, from day one, they taught us that those people you're working with, whether it's your client or your peers, someday might be your customers or you might be their customer. They may be your boss. You never know. And someone I started with after graduate school, 28 years later, became the chief information officer of a huge organization. The same year I became the chief information officer of the University of Texas in Austin. And we still talk with each other. And it just was true. And I had clients who I would have repeat business over years and decades because we were successful together. They trusted us. And 80% of our customers are repeat customers.
Yeah, people first always. What's the worst advice you've ever heard about getting buy-in?
That you don't really need to get people participating in the decision, that you can just be the imperial hand waver and it'll happen. And that's totally wrong. When I met with the vice provost who is in charge of curriculum, so we had 54,000 students, 4,000 faculty, 21,000 staff, and she wanted to have a new learning management system for all the courses that would allow lectures to be videotaped or recorded, and then classroom time have more for discussion. So the vice provost and I, our organizations worked together with faculty and staff to go through a procurement process, evaluate 15 different products, and we picked a modern cloud-based, using industry standard solution. And it took us 2 years, but working together, we were able to move that university to the new world. Now, my legacy vendor didn't care about us and took its advantage of us, just came for his check once a year. That was always 10% more than the year before. And he, I was so glad to fire them 2 years later, and they never saw it coming. They were that clueless. So that's someone who doesn't give a damn. The new vendor, the vice president for sales, would call me every month just to make sure everything was on track. And his team was standing ready to help us because he knew if he could get us to be successful, all the other large Research One universities would follow. And this was 10 years ago. Guess what? All the other Research One universities followed. And I still talk to the VP, senior vice president for sales. He cared.
And it makes a difference. It always makes a difference.
Yeah.
So what's a leadership trend right now that makes your skin crawl? You just can't stand it.
I think the feeling that you can't have remote work, I think the whole move to hybrid was a plus for everybody. To drag people back to the office, I think is a really horrible idea, especially if their work doesn't have to be done in the office.
Yeah, my last guest, that's what his company does is he helps businesses create like a hybrid workplace. He says like one of the things they did is they surveyed the employees and they asked them like, what would your ideal workstation be like? And most of them described their home workstation. And
Yeah.
he said, I had to have a conversation with the leaders in the company to like group the teams in one team in one
Sure.
area, make it more. I actually am, I hate these, but it's an open office space. I can't stand them because they're always too noisy. I could tell you talk about stories in my database. There's been
Mhm.
many about that. And he said that the data just shows that work from office all the time, not the greatest. Work from home all the time, not the greatest. But some form of hybrid is works really well. And you ask the CEO, and he work in the office all the time and work at home once in a while. So you have to
Well,
define what it.
I had a boss, a chief financial officer, who did not like remote work. And I'm in IT at Accenture. I didn't have an office. I was a partner for 10 years. I didn't have an office. I was either home or at a client. And he just, you know what? He just didn't trust his employees. He didn't trust us.
Trust is the key. Yeah.
And it's, dude, that's where I think COVID forced that to happen. But I don't like the backtracking.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think actually like one of the things we talked about in that episode was what are we going to, when we look back in a decade from now, are we going to see that we killed the office or do we make it better?
Yeah.
And hopefully we can see that we made it better because
Mm.
I honestly do think that there's a reason to come to the office some of the time, but I'm with you.
Yeah, Accenture's been doing hoteling for many years,
Yeah.
and it
It's
works out fine.
so many tech sales companies. It's exactly like that. You're either at your home setting up the appointments and your travel, and then you're traveling. So why have this expensive off? And people don't realize like at a, say, $5 a square foot, and you got
Mhm.
this teeny tiny office of 100 square feet, that's $500 a month
Yeah.
you're paying for that space. And if no one's ever going to be in there, or if they're going to be in there once a month or once every 2 months, what's the point? Save
Yeah.
them. I used to work for a company that was long before the pandemic that was very forward thinking, and they had
Mhm.
7 offices that were basically rotating offices. So when it was your day to be in the office, you could use one of those offices. And
Mhm.
otherwise, when you weren't there, someone else used the office. And
Sure.
the only thing it takes away, of course, is personalizing your office. But who cares if you're not there? So after 4 decades of leadership, transformation, and strategy, you've clearly mastered leading with influence. Okay, but here's the big question. What do you think happens to an organization when no one learns how to lead without authority? What's the real cost there?
It's really a disservice to the organization. You're losing productivity. You're losing the ability to have the synergy between teams. Again, my peers at the university, vice president for facilities, we have 16 million square feet. It all has IT. I need to work together with them. We built a $32 million data center together. Same thing with the vice provost for curriculum and the safety. If you're not collaborating, you're just doing a disservice to the organization. Now, some of my peers didn't play well. And I had a situation where, a peer and I reported to the same boss. After I went to the boss and said, I need some help here. And in that case, the boss wouldn't go for it. And so the peer just did something very inefficient for a number of years. It was very frustrating.
Why don't you let the listeners know where they can connect with you if they want to find out more?
I'm on LinkedIn and my website is www.bradenglert.com. And I'm going to send you a customized link that you can put in the show notes that I'll send your listeners to a free sample of the book, how to buy the book, and a tab on how to schedule time on my calendar.
Awesome. Awesome. We appreciate that. So, guys, this was Brad Englert. He's a technologist, advisor, and author, and a living reminder that real leadership doesn't always come with a fancy title. Now, if you got value out of this, remember, leadership isn't about waiting for permission. It's about showing up with purpose, with trust, and with influence. The Inside Executive Tech Alliance, our free community for tech leaders, we dive deeper into topics just like this every single day.